You are sitting in your car.
Right.
The engine is off.
Yeah.
The meeting, it ended 20 minutes ago, but your hands are still gripping the steering wheel so tightly that your knuckles are white.
Yeah.
Your chest is tight. Your heart is racing. And your mind is obsessively replaying a conversation that, well, on paper, it was completely professional.
No voices were raised.
Exactly. No obvious insults were thrown. Yet you feel entirely drained, profoundly confused, and inexplicably on edge. You're wondering, for the 100th time this month, am I going crazy? Like, is it me? Am I the problem?
Well, you aren't crazy. And you definitely aren't the problem. You are experiencing the physiological aftermath of an invisible transaction.
Wow, an invisible transaction.
Yes. You've basically just survived an encounter with an invisible operating system of control. And your body knows it, even if your rational brain hasn't quite figured out the mechanics of what just happened.
And if you're tuning into this deep dive today, you probably know exactly what that feels like.
Right.
It is highly likely that you are dealing with someone, a boss, a co-parent, an ex, or maybe a family member who leaves you feeling exactly like that person in the car.
Yeah.
And I want to make you a promise right now. By the end of this investigation, you will possess a secret operating manual.
You're going to learn how to identify covert psychological manipulation that most people, frankly, never see, even after years of exposure.
Right. And more importantly, you are going to learn the ultimate behavioral countermeasure to neutralize it.
We're going to treat this dynamic like a behavioral forensics investigation today. I was going through some incredible clinical research earlier this week, pulling together neurobiological frameworks from Dr. Stephen Porges, looking at organizational behavior through the lens of Stanford's Robert Sutton.
The workplace stuff.
Exactly. And reading case studies from clinical therapists like Annie Wright. And when you synthesize all these different fields, a very clear, very disturbing picture emerges.
It really does.
It reveals what we call the covert narcissist and the mechanism required to survive them, known as the gray rock method.
And we are attacking this from two distinct angles in this investigation. I want to represent your physical reality, like the clinical and neurobiological stakes of what happens to a person enduring this.
Because it's not just a bad mood.
No, it's not just a communication issue or a quirky, difficult personality. We are talking about survival circuitry, trauma bonds, literal nervous system hijackings.
Right.
The physical toll this takes on a human being is immense.
And I want to break down the tactical stakes. We are going to map out the behavioral forensics here. This is about power, coercion, manipulation systems, and a psychological concept called behavioral extinction.
What is fascinating?
We're going to expose this invisible predator by looking at the observable behaviors, the hidden motivations, and most importantly, the unconscious drivers that dictate every move they make.
I think the most shocking insight to start with, the thing that flips everything upside down for anyone dealing with this, is that the very things that make you a good, healthy human being are the exact things being weaponized against you.
That's the tragic part.
Right. Your empathy,
Yeah.
your desire to communicate clearly, your instinct to seek resolution and harmony. Those aren't assets in this dynamic.
Not at all.
They are the exploit in the system. The psychological predator is using your healthiest instincts to dismantle your reality.
That paradox is exactly where we need to begin. People have this massive misconception about what a manipulator or a narcissist looks like,
We think of the movie Villain.
Exactly. We're conditioned by movies to expect a villain wearing a mask, twirling a mustache, shouting, throwing things, openly demanding compliance. But a covert narcissist operates completely differently.
How so?
They hide behind vulnerability, they hide behind charm, they often hide behind extreme professional competence or, interestingly, a victim narrative.
Which makes them so hard to spot. Because if they were just monsters all the time, you would have walked away.
Right.
If a boss yelled at you on day one, you would quit. If a partner insulted you on the first date, there would be no second date. They don't look dangerous.
So what do they look like? Like, how do we profile them in the wild, say, in a corporate workplace or neighborhood association?
Let's run a forensic analysis on their observable behavior. In a professional setting, overt aggression is career limiting, right?
Right. HR gets involved.
Exactly. If you scream at your team, you're gone. So the covert narcissist adapts to the environment. They use subtle, highly calibrated tactics that leave no obvious paper trail. Think about credit theft and narrative control.
Oh, this one is so common.
Pay incredibly close attention to the pronouns they use over a 6-month period. They have an uncanny instinct for using the word we when a project succeeds.
Yep.
and she or he when there is a delay or a failure. It is rarely a dramatic, bald-faced lie where they say, I did all the work.
Because that would be too obvious. Right. Instead, it is a gradual repositioning of the narrative. It's like the tide shifting the sand. By the time annual reviews come around, the entire department somehow believes this person was the architect of every success.
And a tragic bystander to every failure.
Precisely.
That is so insidious because it's almost impossible to call out without sounding petty. Like if you complain to your boss that they said we instead of you, you look unhinged.
Exactly. You look like you're not a team player. They rely on the fact that social norms prevent you from calling out microaggressions.
Wow.
Or consider public undermining. They won't yell at you in a meeting. That's too obvious. Instead, they wait until you take a firm position in front of senior leadership.
Right.
Then they deliver the pointed question, heavily disguised as intellectual curiosity or team collaboration.
What does that sound like?
It sounds like it. Just to push back on that a little, are we sure the data supports that timeline? I just want to make sure we're protected.
Oh, wow. Let's break that down. Because to the rest of the room, that sounds like a highly responsible colleague.
Let's do a line-by-line breakdown. What was said? A standard business question about data and timelines.
Right.
What was meant? I'm challenging your authority and highlighting a potential flaw in your judgment.
And what power shift just occurred in the room?
They position themselves as the cautious, strategic, protective thinker, and they painted you as the potentially reckless one who hasn't fully thought through the data.
And the trap is, if I react to that defensively, if my tone gets sharp because I know exactly what they are doing, I look emotional.
Yes.
And they look even more reasonable. They just put their hands up and say, whoa, I'm just asking a question.
And suddenly, you are the difficult one. It is a perfectly laid track. Another tactic they use constantly is moving the goalposts.
How does that work?
You have a conversation in March. They set a target. You work 60 hours a week and you hit that target perfectly. But in April, suddenly the criteria have shifted. What was defined as a success in March is now presented as evidence of a performance gap. They say, oh, well, yes, you got the numbers, but the strategic vision wasn't quite aligned with what we discussed.
That's a sophisticated form of gaslighting.
It absolutely is.
What baffles me is how they manage their image so well. I mean, I've heard countless clinical stories where someone is being psychologically tortured by a boss or a partner, and everyone else in their life thinks that person is an angel.
We call that charm management.
Charm management.
Yeah. The covert narcissist will show two completely different faces depending on the power dynamic. To their superiors, to the board, or to the outside community, they are deferential, charismatic, helpful, brilliant.
And behind closed doors.
To their subordinates or with the spouse, they are withholding, hypercritical, and cold. This creates a terrible isolation for the victim.
Because if you try to tell someone what you're experiencing, the response is often, really, but they are so nice.
Exactly. You sound crazy.
This brings up a critical question about the target profile. Like, why does this person choose you? There is this pervasive myth in popular psychology that narcissists prey on the weak, the insecure, or the broken.
Completely false.
Right. Clinical evidence shows something entirely different. They don't want a weak target. They target highly competent, deeply empathetic, incredibly driven people.
Yes.
They specifically hunt for what we call highly sensitive persons or individuals who are highly conscientious and prone to taking on responsibility.
From a psychological standpoint, why do you think that is? Why hunt the strong instead of the weak?
Because a highly responsible, driven person will automatically internalize the moving goalpost. Think about the mechanics of empathy and conscientiousness.
Okay.
When the narcissist says, this wasn't what I expected, a person with low empathy or low responsibility might just say, that's your problem, you're lying.
They brush it off.
Right. But the driven, empathetic target, their internal script says, oh no, I must have failed to understand them. I need to communicate better. I need to work harder to fix this.
Yeah.
The target literally does the manipulator's work for them. The narcissist sets the trap, but the target's own sense of responsibility is the mechanism that springs it.
That highlights the hidden motivation underlying all this behavior. Clinical theorists point out that narcissists operate from a fundamental inability to tolerate the separate emotional reality of other people.
They lack object constancy.
Exactly. They lack genuine empathy.
I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around the depths of this.
Yeah.
Are you saying they view my independence, like my separate thoughts, my boundaries, my distinct emotional state, as a literal threat to their existence?
Yes. Absolutely. To a deeply fragile narcissistic ego, another person having a separate reality is terrifying.
Why?
If you have your own reality, you might realize they aren't perfect, you might abandon them. Therefore, they need to subsume you. They need to control your reality so that it perfectly aligns with their need to feel superior and safe.
Let me push back on you here, though, or at least challenge the premise of intentionality. Because this sounds like a conscious Machiavellian plot. Are they sitting in their office, tenting their fingers, drawing up blueprints to systematically destroy my sense of self?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Or is this an automatic ego that just happens to be incredibly destructive?
This is a critical debate in behavioral profiling. The forensics suggest it is largely an automatic reflex. It is a highly evolved defense mechanism developed in their own early childhood.
So they aren't planning it.
Most covert narcissists do not wake up and think, I am going to gaslight my employee today. But, and this is a massive but, whether it is conscious malice or an unconscious pathological reflex, the damage to the victim is identical.
That's a great point.
A shark isn't consciously evil when it bites you. It's just doing what its biology dictates, but you still bleed out.
Right.
The behavior is incredibly strategic, even if the strategy is operating below their conscious awareness. They constantly read the room, probe for weaknesses, and test for vulnerabilities.
Speaking of testing for vulnerabilities, there's a specific phrase I want to examine because it is the ultimate escalation point in these dynamics.
Which one?
It's the weaponized apology, the classic line, "I'm sorry you feel that way."
Ah, yes. The absolute hallmark of the covert manipulator. Let's put that phrase under a microscope and dissect the invisible transaction taking place.
Please, because on the surface, it sounds like an olive branch, like they're trying to make peace.
That is the camouflage. Let's look at what is actually happening, what was said. I'm sorry you feel that way. What was meant? Your feelings are a highly subjective, irrational reaction to my perfectly acceptable behavior.
Oof.
What emotional response is being targeted? It is precision engineered to trigger your self-doubt. It makes you pause and wonder if you are, in fact, just being too sensitive or dramatic.
And what about the power shift?
Yeah.
Because it always feels like the air gets sucked out of the room when someone says that to you.
The power shift is absolute. The abuser is completely absolved of accountability for their actions.
Because they didn't apologize for what they did.
Exactly. They haven't apologized for what they did. They have expressed a detached pity for how you reacted. The victim is now completely isolated with their irrational feelings.
Wow.
It is a brilliant, devastating transaction where accountability is transferred entirely onto the victim's emotional state.
And this brings us directly into the currency of control. Because once they make you doubt yourself, your natural human instinct is to want to explain yourself.
Of course.
You think, they just don't understand my perspective. If I just explain it clearly, they will see that my feelings are justified. And that instinct leads us into one of the most dangerous traps in human psychology.
Traditional conflict resolution fails spectacularly here. If you try to resolve a conflict with a covert narcissist using healthy communication tools, statements, active listening, expressing vulnerability,
It backfires.
you are essentially handing a burglar the blueprints to your house. To understand why, we have to understand a concept called narcissistic supply.
I've heard this term thrown around a lot in clinical circles. Break down the mechanics of narcissistic supply for me. What actually is it?
Think of it as an emotional currency. Narcissists run on this invisible currency to regulate their own fragile self-worth.
Okay.
Supply is the attention, the admiration, the fear, or the sense of control they extract from you. Here is the terrifying part, and the thing most victims fail to realize. They do not care if the emotional reaction you give them is positive or negative.
Wait, so they don't care if I'm praising them or screaming at them?
Not at all. Admiration, praise, and love, that's grade A supply. But rage, tears, defensiveness, and deep frustration, that is also grade A supply.
Why?
Because any emotional response proves that they have power over your reality. If they can make you cry, they exist. If they can make you lose sleep and send a frantic email at 2:00 a.m., they are powerful. Your emotional dysregulation regulates them.
That is deeply unsettling. If my anxiety soothes their insecurity, then they are literally incentivized to keep me in a constant state of anxiety.
Oh, exactly. Which leads us to the trap that most targets fall into. We call it the JADE framework. JADE stands for justify, argue, defend, explain.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Let's say a narcissistic project manager publicly blames you on a team call for a missed timeline.
Okay.
A timeline that was missed because they failed to send you the necessary files. The target, acting out of a healthy sense of justice, gets off the call, goes to their desk, and spends 45 minutes writing a highly detailed 3-paragraph Slack message or email.
I can picture it.
Right. They lay out the dates, they attach the timestamps, they reference the original agreements. They're trying to logically explain the reality of the situation to clear their name.
Let's do a forensic breakdown of what happens the moment you hit send on that email.
Okay.
As the victim, you think you are clearing up a misunderstanding. You think you are communicating facts. But the narcissist reads that 3-paragraph defense, and they do not see facts. They see data.
What do you mean by data?
They see exactly which buttons they push to get you to spend 45 minutes of your life writing an anxious defense.
Oh, wow.
They look at your detailed timeline and think, they value their professional reputation above all else. Good to know. Every word you use to justify, argue, defend, or explain is collected, twisted, and categorized as fresh ammunition.
That's terrifying.
You think you are closing the argument. They know they have successfully hooked you, and they can keep pulling the line.
That is a massive perspective shift.
Yeah.
Let that sink in for a second if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
Every single time you try to convince a manipulative person of your value, your truth, or your reality, you are not engaging in communication.
Yeah.
You are making a supply donation. You are feeding the machine.
A supply donation, that is exactly what it is.
But I have to challenge this tactically. Human beings are wired to defend their reputation. If my boss accuses me of failing, and I don't defend myself at work, don't I lose my job? Don't I look guilty to the rest of the team if I stay silent? Like, how on earth do you survive this without destroying your career or losing your mind?
That is the exact dilemma that traps people for years.
Yeah.
And it bridges us directly to the behavioral countermeasure we promised at the beginning, the Gray Rock Protocol.
Okay, the Gray Rock Protocol. The concept is essentially becoming as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally flat as a dull gray stone in a riverbed.
Right. But I want to elevate this beyond a simple internet buzzword. Gray rock is not just a metaphor. It is grounded in hard, empirical behavioral science.
The extinction stuff.
Specifically, the science of extinction. If you look at Dr. Mark Boutin's research on learning and behavioral extinction, it demonstrates a fundamental law of conditioning. If a behavior stops producing a reward, the behavior will eventually die out.
Like a rat in a Skinner box pressing a lever for a food pellet. If the lever stops giving food, eventually the rat stops pressing it.
Exactly. If the covert manipulation no longer yields the reward of your emotional reaction, if it yields zero narcissistic supply, the narcissist behavioral loop is broken. They will eventually starve and look elsewhere for a more compliant source of supply.
But how do you tactically execute this?
Yeah.
Especially in a high-stakes environment like an office or while exchanging children with a hostile co-parent. Your nervous system is screaming at you to fight back.
Tactical execution requires immense, almost superhuman discipline. It means no extended eye contact because eye contact transfers emotional energy.
Right.
It means training yourself to use a monotone, flat voice. It means giving brief, purely factual answers. You completely eliminate the sharing of personal information.
Give me an example.
If they ask, "How was your weekend?" you do not say, "It was great, I took my kids to the zoo." That is data they can use later.
To use against you.
Exactly. You say, "It was fine, thanks. Did you still need the Q3 report by noon?"
You give them absolutely zero surface area to grab onto. Let's look at the email template for Gray Rock. In the previous example, the target sent a 3-paragraph emotional defense full of justifications. What does the Gray Rock version of that email look like?
Let's play it out. I will be the narcissistic project manager sending the blame-shifting email.
Okay.
The project failed because you were too slow on your deliverables. Your lack of urgency is deeply disappointing and is impacting the whole team.
Okay, reading that, my heart rate spikes, my blood pressure goes up, my instinct is to reply, I wasn't slow, I was waiting on you. But using Gray Rock, I have to strip all the heat out of the response. My reply must be short, factual, and devoid of emotion.
Right.
So I take a breath and I write. Project X was submitted on October 12th at 9 a.m. I have attached the delivery receipt for your records. Let me know if further operational data is needed.
Perfect. What emotional response did I get as the narcissist? Nothing. What ammunition did you give me for the next attack? Nothing. I threw a psychological punch, and you simply weren't there to absorb it. You are starving me out.
But keeping that flat effect in person is incredibly difficult when someone is actively provoking you.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Clinical therapist Annie Wright suggests distraction techniques. While they are monologuing at you, trying to get a rise out of you, You actively shift your focus. You count the ceiling tiles. You focus on the sensation of your feet touching the ground.
Yeah, grounding exercise.
You twiddle your thumbs under the desk to physically block your brain from actively listening to their words. You are physically present, but emotionally, you have left the building.
That physical grounding is essential. Now, there is a vital variant to this method that we have to discuss, particularly in family dynamics or co-parenting situations.
Yes, the yellow rock variant. This is so important because in family court, if you are co-parenting with a narcissist, being too gray or completely flat can actually be weaponized against you.
How does that happen?
The narcissist will take your flat, emotionless text messages and show them to a judge, a mediator, or a custody evaluator. They will play the victim and say, "Look at this. I am trying to co-parent peacefully, and they are hostile, cold, and alienating."
And then twisted.
Right. To an untrained judge, your trauma response looks like aggression. So Yellow Rock adds a very shallow, superficial veneer of polite warmth. You use standard pleasantries like, "Have a great weekend," or "Thanks for dropping the kids off on time."
It looks perfectly cooperative.
It looks perfectly cooperative and friendly to an outside observer, but you maintain the ironclad boundary of zero authentic emotional disclosure.
That is a crucial tactical adaptation. But returning to the workplace application, I can anticipate a major concern from our listeners.
What's that?
If you start acting like a flat, boring rock at the office, won't your boss just fire you for being uncooperative? Don't they notice you were doing this?
That's the brilliance of workplace gray rock. If done correctly, it is completely indistinguishable from highly focused, collaborative professional behavior.
You're just working.
Right. You aren't stonewalling.
Yeah.
You aren't giving them the silent treatment. You are answering every single operational question. You are delivering your work on time. You are just profoundly boring to interact with. You become what some psychologists call warm but waterproof.
Waterproof. I like that image. The toxicity just slides off. But here is where we hit a major escalation point in our investigation. This is the part that terrifies people.
Oh, yeah.
What happens immediately after you deploy Gray Rock? What happens in the days following the severing of the supply line?
The reality,
Yeah.
it gets worse. It gets much, much worse before it gets better.
In behavioral science, we call this the extinction burst. Think about a vending machine.
Right.
When you put $1 in a vending machine, press the button, and the candy bar doesn't drop, what is your immediate reaction? Do you just nod and walk away?
No. You press the button again, harder, you hit the side of the machine, you shake it.
Exactly. You escalate your behavior to force the machine to yield the expected reward. The psychological predator does the exact same thing when you stop giving them emotional supply.
They shake the machine.
When Gray Rock begins, their internal alarm bells ring. They realize they are losing control, and they will dramatically escalate their tactics to break your resolve.
The retaliation sequence is incredibly predictable, almost like clockwork. First, they might try what we call hoovering and love bombing.
Right.
Suddenly, the terrible boss or the cruel ex is your best friend again. They are sending you overly praising emails. They are buying you coffee. They are trying to exploit your empathy to pull you back into the cycle.
And if the love bombing doesn't work, if you remain a Gray Rock, they pivot violently to narcissistic rage. This is where the mask slips.
But it gets scary here.
Public confrontations. Moving the goalpost rapidly and aggressively, creating sudden fabricated crises that demand your immediate panic attention. They are shaking the vending machine.
And if that doesn't work, they resort to smear campaigns and flying monkeys.
Flying monkeys.
This term comes from The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch sends her monkeys to do her bidding. The narcissist recruits mutual friends, extended family, or coworkers.
They play the victim.
They play the ultimate victim. They tell everyone, "I don't know what's wrong with them lately. They're so cold and difficult. I'm really worried about their mental health." They weaponize your community to pressure you into reacting.
Here is the game-changing perspective shift for the listener. When you experience this intense, terrifying escalation, it is not a sign that you are failing.
Yeah.
It is empirical proof that the Gray Rock strategy is working. The abuser is starving.
That reframing is vital. The escalation means the supply line is officially severed. But we have to talk about the absolute danger of relapse here, because this is where most people break.
It's so hard.
Let's say you Gray Rock your abuser for 13 days, you endure the love bombing, you survive the rage, you ignore the flying monkeys, but on day 14 the pressure is just too immense, the smear campaign is too painful, and you snap. You write the angry email, you yell back. What just happened structurally?
You just engaged in intermittent reinforcement. You have inadvertently taught the abuser that their new extreme level of abuse is exactly what it takes to break you. You haven't stopped the behavior. You have accidentally trained them to be more relentless. You prove that if they just push hard enough for 14 days, they will get their supply. You made the predator stronger.
Which brings up a terrifying question. If the stakes are that high, how can you, the listener, possibly withstand this intense escalating pressure without breaking?
It feels impossible.
How do you sit in a room while someone systematically tries to destroy your professional reputation or your family relationships and just, count the ceiling tiles?
To answer that, we have to go deeper than behavioral tactics. We have to look at the neurobiology of the trap. We have to explain why your own brain betrays you in these moments.
This is where we bring in the clinical heavyweights, Dr. Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory. Because when you are sitting across from that narcissistic boss, your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, knows you should stay calm.
It knows the template.
It knows gray rock template. But what is your body actually doing?
Walk us through the physical mechanics of that moment.
Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, your stomach drops because your digestive system shuts down to redirect blood to your muscles.
Yeah.
You start sweating. You can't sleep at night because your brain is obsessively rehearsing conversations, scanning for threats.
That is not a psychological weakness.
Exactly. I want every listener to hear this. It is not weakness. It is a literal neurochemical hijacking. Your autonomic nervous system is interpreting this person not as a difficult coworker, but as a life-or-death predatory threat.
Your body thinks you're going to die.
Your vagus nerve has assessed the microexpressions on their face, the tone of their voice, and signaled your brain to flood your body with adrenaline and cortisol. You are being pushed into a sympathetic fight-or-flight state, or, if the abuse is chronic, a dorsal vagal freeze state. You cannot effectively gray rock when your nervous system has taken your cognitive brain offline.
And prolonged exposure to this alternating cycle of calm and terror creates something incredibly difficult to break, the trauma bond. Let's examine the biological mechanism of that bond.
Let's do it.
It operates exactly like a casino slot machine.
The intermittent reinforcement cycle.
Yes. The narcissist cycle of idealize, devalue, and discard creates an unpredictable reward system. During the good moments, the love bombing, the apologies, the rare moments of connection, your brain is flooded with dopamine and oxytocin.
It feels amazing.
It feels euphoric because of the contrast to the pain, but during the devaluation and rage, you are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline.
Over time, your brain becomes addicted to the biochemical roller coaster. You literally develop a chemical dependency on the abuser's validation to regulate your own nervous system.
That's an addiction.
When they are angry, your body feels like it is going through physical withdrawal. And the only way to get the fix is to appease them and win back their approval.
Which brings us to a deeply uncomfortable yet necessary question. Why are some people more susceptible to this hijacking than others?
Why them?
Yeah, why was the listener targeted and why do they find it so hard to leave?
To understand this, we have to look at developmental origins. We look at the work of Pete Walker on complex trauma and Dr. Richard Schwartz's internal family systems, or IFS.
Okay.
If you are chronically stuck in this dynamic, it is highly likely that your childhood installed a specific survival mechanism called the fawn response.
Break down the fawn response for us. We know fight, flight, and freeze. What is fawn?
Evolutionarily, if a child is trapped with an unpredictable, emotionally volatile, or narcissistic caregiver, they cannot fight back. They're too small.
Right.
They cannot flee. They rely on the caregiver for food and shelter. Freezing doesn't stop the emotional abuse. So, the child's nervous system develops a fourth strategy: appeasement, fawning.
Soothing the threat.
They learn that safety comes from perfectly anticipating the dangerous person's needs. They learn to manage the adult's reality, to soothe their rage, to become whatever the adult needs them to be in order to survive.
So in the IFS model, this is a protective mechanism.
Yes, Schwartz would call this a protector part of your psyche.
Mm-hmm.
This caretaker or fawn part works exhausting hours to protect a deeply vulnerable exile part of you, usually the inner child who feels terrified and unworthy of love. You carry this fawn response into adulthood.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, here is a major revelation for anyone listening. The narcissist didn't break you.
No.
They neurobiologically scanned you. They found the fracture that was already there from your past, and they exploited it. They recognized your fawn response. They saw that you automatically take responsibility for other people's bad behavior.
And here is the tragic irony. to a nervous system that grew up with an unpredictable caregiver. The chaos of the narcissist doesn't feel like a threat to run away from. It feels like home.
Wow.
Your nervous system recognizes the pattern. It knows how to dance this dance. A steady, reliable, safe partner feels boring or even foreign. But the unpredictable hot and cold narcissist triggers a deep, unconscious recognition.
So you're saying the victim is actually addicted to the abuser's validation. They are biologically hooked on the very thing destroying them.
Yes. And I have to state that with zero shame attached,
Mhm.
it is a brilliant physiological adaptation for survival. Your body's doing exactly what it was trained to do to keep you alive.
It's trying to save you.
But because of this, deploying Grey Rock isn't just about learning a clever communication trick for the office. It's about fighting your own deeply ingrained neurobiology. You are asking your body to ignore its primary survival mechanism,
Right.
which is exactly why Grey Rock is incredibly dangerous if it is misunderstood or used improperly.
This exposes a hidden layer that redefines everything we've discussed so far. We need to look at the dark side of Grey Rock. What is the hidden, devastating cost of using this method long term?
People on the internet talk about Grey Rock like it's a magic, impenetrable shield. Just be a rock.
Right, like it's easy.
But they don't talk about what it does to a highly sensitive person, or anyone with deep empathy, to actively suppress their humanity for 40 hours a week.
From a behavioral standpoint, it leads to profound identity erosion. Imagine putting on a mask every single day. If you spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, pretending to be a dull, unfeeling, unintelligent rock, the boundary between strategic role play and your core self begins to blur.
You lose yourself.
You start losing access to your own authentic voice. Even when the abuser isn't around, you find you can't feel joy, you can't express sadness, you are just numb.
Drawing on the clinical work of Dr. Gabor Mate,
Mhm.
we know that the body keeps the score. When you chronically suppress your authentic emotional reactions, those emotions don't magically disappear.
They go somewhere.
Your body absorbs that trapped sympathetic energy. We see targets of chronic workplace or domestic abuse developing severe somatic collapse. It manifests physically: chronic migraines, TMJ and jaw clenching, severe gastrointestinal issues, autoimmune flares, and debilitating depression. You are internalizing the violence instead of reflecting it.
And there's a devastating psychological trap embedded in this as well, isn't there?
A massive one. If you grew up with childhood trauma, you likely internalize the belief that your true self, your big emotions, your needs, your authentic voice was dangerous and unacceptable.
Right.
When you use Grey Rock, you are actively forcing yourself to hide your true feelings to survive. You are accidentally validating your deepest childhood wound. You are telling your inner exile, see, who I really am is dangerous, and it must be hidden so we can stay safe.
That is a haunting realization. Grey Rock is not a way of life. Imagine wearing a literal hazmat suit into a nuclear reactor.
Okay.
Yes, it stops the radiation from killing you immediately, but you also can't feel the breeze, you can't hug your children, you can't breathe deeply. The suit is heavy and suffocating. If you wear it 24 hours a day, the suit itself becomes a torture device.
It's completely restrictive.
Grey Rock is a harm reduction tool. It is not a healing strategy.
Exactly. You cannot heal inside a hazmat suit. You can only survive.
But let me push back on this, because we have to live in the real world.
Yeah.
What is the middle ground? If a listener is trapped, say they can't leave their job because they need the health insurance, or they share 50-50 custody and cannot go no contact with an abusive
Right.
and they can't afford to lose their mind to somatic collapse, what do they do?
The middle ground is understanding the critical clinical difference between containment and suppression.
Containment versus suppression.
Yes. Suppression is a lie you tell yourself. Suppression is saying, I shouldn't feel angry. I am a gray rock. I feel nothing. That destroys your immune system and your psyche.
And containment.
Containment is acknowledging the truth. Containment is saying, I feel incredibly angry, terrified, and violated right now. My heart is racing. But I am making a strategic, conscious choice not to give this predator access to my anger.
So you hold the emotion, but you deny them the transaction.
Yes, you contain the emotion in the moment, but you must vigorously process it later in a safe space. You go to therapy, you journal furiously.
You let it out.
You go to the gym and lift heavy weights to burn off the adrenaline. You scream in your car. You don't swallow the poison. You hold it in a tightly sealed jar until you can safely dispose of it away from the narcissist.
Containment versus suppression. That is a vital distinction for long-term survival. But we have to zoom out now to the macro level. Why are you in this situation to begin with?
The systems.
Why are there so many narcissists in positions of authority? Why does the system, the matrix of our society, seem to reward them?
This is so important because victims almost always internalize the blame. They feel like it's their personal failure, that they can't fix the toxic workplace or save the marriage. But the game is rigged at an institutional level.
It is entirely rigged. Look at corporate contagion. Stanford's Robert Sutton has documented this extensively in his work on workplace dynamics. Organizations routinely promote high-conflict narcissistic individuals.
That's wild. Why?
Because the behavioral traits of a covert narcissist, overconfidence, extreme charm, ruthlessness, a willingness to take credit, and a fundamental lack of empathy, are routinely misread by corporate boards as strong leadership and decisiveness.
They mistake toxicity for competence.
The system promotes the predator because the predator produces short-term results, even as they destroy the long-term health of the team.
And we have to highlight the gender dimension here, especially for driven women in the corporate workplace. There is a massive systemic double standard.
Absolutely.
When a male colleague exhibits aggressive, boundary-pushing, or narcissistic traits, he's often praised as a go-getter or a shark.
He's a leader.
But when a woman uses assertive, documented pushback against a toxic, narcissistic boss when she defends her boundaries, the system immediately labels her difficult, emotional, or not a team player.
Every time.
The narcissist relies on this. They know the patriarchal structures of the system will punish you for defending yourself.
Which leads directly to what psychologists call institutional betrayal. It's the deep trauma that occurs when you finally gather the courage to go to HR, or you go to family court, or you go to the elders of a religious community with proof of the abuse.
You think they'll help?
And instead of protecting you, the institution protects the abuser. They demand collaboration and compromise from the victim. They essentially demand that you cooperate with your own psychological destruction to maintain the status quo of the institution.
It is a secondary trauma that is often worse than the initial abuse. So if the system is rigged and HR isn't coming to save you on a white horse, what is the play?
This is where Grey Rock evolves from an interpersonal tactic into a systemic strategy. You realize that you cannot fight the narcissist on the battlefield of emotion or truth.
Yeah.
That is their home turf. They will always win because they are unburdened by empathy or facts. Instead, you fight them on the battlefield of paper trails, flawless documentation, and strategic positioning.
You out-administer them?
Exactly. You blind copy your personal email on critical communications. You build independent relationships with skip-level superiors or other departments who can see your actual work, completely bypassing the narcissist's narrative control.
You become a ghost to the narcissist, but highly visible to the people above them.
But at what point is Grey Rock no longer enough? At what point do you have to abandon the strategy?
That's the ultimate question.
Grey Rock fails when the narcissist has unchecked structural power. If they are the CEO, the founder, or the primary shareholder, Grey Rock won't save your career. It will just delay the inevitable.
Right.
It also fails if the situation escalates to any form of physical danger. And ultimately, it fails if, as we discussed, the psychological and somatic cost of wearing the hazmat suit simply becomes too high. If your body is failing, the exit strategy becomes the only strategy.
And exiting doesn't always mean storming out the door tomorrow in a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
It means quiet, meticulous planning. It means gathering your financial resources. It means consulting an employment attorney or a divorce lawyer months before you actually need one. It means documenting everything off-site. And most importantly, it means doing the deep clinical work to untangle your nervous system from their validation so that when you do leave, you don't accidentally seek out another version of them.
We have covered an immense amount of ground in this investigation today.
We really have.
Let's synthesize the forensics we've uncovered. We have seen that covert narcissism is an invisible operating system of control, built entirely on stealing your emotional reactions to regulate their own fragile ego. We've deconstructed their camouflage, from weaponized apologies to the moving goalposts.
We mapped the J80E trap, proving that justifying and defending yourself is just handing them free ammunition. We explored the Grey Rock Protocol as the ultimate defensive firewall, utilizing the science of behavioral extinction to starve the predator of their supply. And we journeyed into the nervous system to understand the trauma bonds, the fawn response, and the somatic toll that make this dynamic so painfully addictive and damaging.
The primary objective of this deep dive was to make sure that you, the listener, can now see the invisible transactions taking place in your own life.
That's the goal.
The next time they subtly try to take credit for your work or send that passive-aggressive email engineered to make you panic, you aren't going to react blindly. Your chest might still tighten, but your mind will see it for exactly what it is. A desperate, pathetic bid for emotional supply.
You have the manual now.
You are no longer blind to the game.
You aren't blind anymore. But I want to leave you with a lingering thought, a question that only you can answer for yourself as you move forward. You've learned how to spot the psychological predator. You have learned the behavioral forensics to starve them of your emotional energy by becoming a gray rock. But the ultimate test isn't your ability to survive them. The real mystery you have to solve now is this. Once the threat is finally gone, and you manage to surround yourself with people who are actually safe, who actually love you, will you remember how to take the hazmat suit off? Will you remember how to be human again?